No, I think that the Christ is not part of his own church.
He's the head of the church. It's his
You said
body.
there were 12 people in the church. Not
Right, in the church.
Jesus was never in the church.
He is the church.
He is the church.
Okay. So we're starting chapter 26. Verse 1. Here when we start in a second. And over the past few chapters, I know it's been a couple weeks, but we stopped at a good point and we ended at the end of a section. It was kind of a depressing point, but it was still the end of a depressing section. But and that section, you may remember, I won't write it on the board again, but that section is often referred to as the Eschatological Discourse, which is the big fancy word for the place where Jesus talks about the end times or the last things. And we showed how he went from he talked about first what was going to happen to Jerusalem and to Judea, where they were in the immediate future. And then he went on to talk about ultimately his own return, right, in the last judgment. And it was pretty bleak, and then we stopped. So, so now we're going to pick up here on chapter 26. It's not going to get a whole lot brighter probably this evening because we're smack in the middle. This is probably about Wednesday of Holy Week. So things are still going to get darker before they get better. But hopefully everybody knows how the gospel ends. So, so hopefully it's not a surprise. So going forward now, Jesus has ended that long discourse, which is sort of effectively his big farewell to his disciples, to his close followers, to say, look, this is now what's going to happen. Once I'm gone, be prepared for it. And ultimately be prepared for my return, because it can happen at any time. Okay. So, chapter 26, verse 1. Now it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, that he said to his disciples, "You know that after 2 days is the Passover, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified." Then the chief priests, the scribes, and the elders of the people assembled at the palace of the high priest, who was called Caiaphas, and plotted to take Jesus by trickery and kill him. But they said, "Not during the feast, lest there be an uproar among the people." Okay, so we talked about they've been plotting against Jesus for a while, as we've seen. And we saw how during this week so far, Jesus and the disciples have been coming during the day and sort of occupying the temple courts, where Jesus has been teaching. And during that time, we saw the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the Herodians and pretty much everybody pop up and take a shot at, trying to argue with Jesus or trick Jesus or trap Jesus into saying something. And they all pretty much failed. And ended up going away sad. So now they're not approaching him anymore. Now they're meeting together in secret to figure out, okay, how are we gonna get rid of this guy? Now, at least at this point, they're saying, well, let's wait until after Passover. Why? Remember, we've talked about before how several years before this, at another Passover, somebody had shown up claiming to be the Messiah. That had ended up getting a whole lot of Jewish people massacred by the Romans. Right? So they don't want a repeat of that. Right? So they say, because if they're going to take Jesus out themselves, how are they going to do it? They don't have the authority to execute people. Right? They're going to use a mob, right? They're going to try and get a mob riled up and go and get him stoned to death or killed by the mob. They're like, doing that during the Passover with all these people here. Not a good idea. That's liable to backfire on us, right? Have the Romans come down on us. We'll wait until after Passover, after people leave the city, when things have calmed down a little, then we could probably get away with it. Right? We can get rid of him and we can get away with it. Now the high priest, who's mentioned here, whose house they're meeting at, Caiaphas. A few years ago they found his tomb, his family tomb. It's actually under a park. like a kid's park, swings and everything in Jerusalem. But they were doing some road work and opened up a shaft accidentally. And they put cameras down the shaft, because of course everything in Jerusalem is built, on top of in layers. Put cameras down the shaft and found this open area full of ossuaries, which are boxes where they put people's bones. This sounds kind of gruesome by American standards, but they still do this, for example, in Greece. And this was the practice at this time too, is, burial space cost a pretty penny. So you didn't just bury someone in a casket and leave them there forever. Right? There wasn't enough territory, right? You couldn't afford it. And so you would bury someone for a couple of years. And then after the second year, the family would go and dig the person up when there was just bones left. And they'd clean the bones and then put them in a box called an ossuary. And then those boxes, if you go to Greece now, you'll see family mausoleums, and they're these little buildings like this big, and if you open the door, it's all these little boxes. A lot of them will have photos on the front of if they're recently deceased people, all in boxes, all on shelves in rows of all the family members. Right? Because that's a much more, you only need a little piece of property
His family didn't do that.
to bury the whole family.
So his family didn't do
No,
that.
his family did do that.
Oh,
There were ossuaries, but they're in these big crypts.
okay.
They were wealthy. Right? So they had a big elaborate box, with the names. So that's how we know he's there. He had about 4 generations of his family who were high priests. And that would have been outside, a little hill outside the city back then. Now it's become part of the city and houses are built over it. But so this is one of those people who we found. There are actually comparatively a lot of them from the Bible. But again, it reminds us that this isn't just a story or a good novel. These are actual human beings who actually lived, on this earth. So notice, and I know I'm going through this backwards, 26 verse 1. Now it came to pass when Jesus had finished all these sayings, right? Meaning what we call the Eschatological Discourse. After he told them all this depressing stuff about the end of the world, now they were going to be judged, now they need to be ready for his return. Right? When he finishes saying all that, he sort of sums it up with, and 2 days from now is the Passover, right? And the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. And we talked about how, for the disciples, they still don't quite get this, because crucified is how false messiahs end up. Right? When you're a false messiah, the Romans end up executing. Right? That's how you know that wasn't the real Messiah, because the Romans got him and they killed him. Right? So Jesus is saying, that's going to happen to me. That's why, as we see in the past, the disciples will object and say, no, or what? Right? Because it doesn't make sense to them. That Jesus is sitting there saying to them, yes, I'm the Messiah, but oh, by the way, the Romans are going to execute me. Right? It doesn't jibe. Right? It doesn't jibe, yeah. Okay. So verse 6, when Jesus was in Bethany, at the house of Simon the leper. Now remember, when they're going into the city during the day, right, into Jerusalem, and Jesus is teaching, and then at night, they're going outside the city to Bethany, right, spending the night there, right, where they've been going back and forth over the last few chapters. So now it's night, he's in the...
That was this between the town.
No. This was maybe half a mile. Bethany, literally, comes from 2 words. first word is, and they're written that way because it's Aramaic. It's the other way, like the way Arabic's written. Beit, which means house, and ani, which means poor. So it's literally the house of the poor. Okay. So Bethany is essentially the slum outside of Jerusalem. It's essentially the lower rent, higher poverty area, right outside of Jerusalem. So Jesus isn't going and staying with some wealthy people he knows outside the city. Right? He's going and staying with whoever invites him. In fact, right off the bat, who's he staying with tonight? Simon the leper. Well, okay. Number one, nobody else would stay there. And number two, if you've got leprosy, you're not living the high life, right?
The footnote said he was already healed.
Right, but still, if you're Simon the leper,
You've been a leper.
you're not in the high strata of society, right? Okay. So, but Jesus is, as usual, he's accepting hospitality, right? This is at the home of Simon the leper. Verse 7, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor. Okay. So, where are we? Right? We're in the house of the poor. All these poor people, meaning this woman who suddenly comes in and does this, isn't some rich woman from the city who just ran out. Right? This is a poor woman. Right? This is a poor woman. This is very expensive, essentially perfume. Right? Very expensive perfume. Right? She comes and pours it on Jesus' head. The disciples are saying, you could have fed half this village dinner, right? On that money, right? She could have supported herself for quite some time on that money, right? This woman, right? So we jump on them a little hard, right? And I know this story is different in the other Gospels, but this is this Gospel. Right? This is Matthew, right? We jump on them a little hard, but we kind of do the same thing, right? I mean, let someone walk into a parish council meeting here and say, okay, here's my idea. I want to put 2 giant icons on either side of the church. Beautiful pictures of Jesus. Just need $25,000. Let's do it. What are people going to say to him?
No.
Sort of the same thing the disciples said, right?
Who's going to pay for it?
We could do a lot with $25,000, right? You want us to do paintings? Really? That's what you want us to do with $25,000? Right? So we're a little hard on them. Right? Really, we kind of think the same way a lot of the time. Right? Wouldn't there have been a better, more practical way to use this money? Right? And it's not like they wanted to do bad with it. It's not like they said, hey man, we could have had a great night on the town with that money. Right? They didn't want to give it to the poor. I mean, I mean, that's not... Yeah, they weren't just like, hey, let's go get drunk on the money. They were wanting to do something else good, right? Verse 10, but when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not have always. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly I say to you, wherever this gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her. Well, and lo and behold, it's here, so it has been. Right? So that prophecy has been fulfilled. Okay, but what is this about? Right, so what's the point? A lot of people will take this verse and say, oh look, the poor you'll always have with you, so we shouldn't bother trying to help them. Right? There's always going to be poor people. What are you going to do? Why bother trying? Right? I've seen plenty of people. Right?
There's a minimum wage of 25, that's still poor people.
Yeah. But that's not what it's talking about. Right? That's not what it's talking about. What it's talking about is, see, I haven't been to Ica, so I don't know if this is true. But I know there are a lot of villages in the Middle East, there are a lot of villages in Russia, where if you go and you look at the church in the village, and then you go and you look at the houses in the village, the church is gorgeous and amazing. And then you have a bunch of people living around it in total poverty. You know, total poverty. Because everything they give to the church, right? Because they're giving it to God. They're giving it to Christ, right? This is what that's talking about. Right? Because the point isn't of how this woman is judged by Jesus, right, as opposed to how she's judged by the disciples. Jesus judges her by what's in her heart and the offering she's making from her heart to him. Right? The disciples are running ledger sheets, right? In terms of, well, maybe we should have done, right, this with it instead. Right? What someone offers to God with a pure heart is honorable. Right? Is honorable. And so that is not to be criticized. That person is doing a great thing. And we need to, especially as modern Americans, modern capitalist Americans, need to sometimes shift our thinking, right, in this regard. Right? For example, a lot of the people who founded this church who originally built the first building, and who originally paid for the stained glass windows, and originally were immigrants who were broke, who had nothing, right? Who had nothing, that were giving to this church. Well, someone could have stepped in at the time and said, well, look, you got kids. Why don't you buy your kids nicer clothes, right? Why don't you move into a better neighborhood, right? Why are you giving all this money to the church? We're giving all this money to the church. Because we tend to evaluate, like we look at a kid's upbringing and say, well, what material things did their parents provide for them? And if their parents provided them all these material things, we say, oh wow, they were really good parents. They really provided for and took care of their family. Whereas somebody on the other hand who maybe didn't give them much materially, right? Because they were giving their money to the church, and by the way, taking the kids to church, and gave the children an upbringing in the church, has given them a much bigger gift than an extra doll on Christmas, an extra dress on their birthday, right? an extra toy car. We don't value our faith and value, frankly, Christ enough. That's what this passage is trying to tell us. If we really understood Christ's value, which is infinite, right, as the Savior of our souls, right, there's nothing else you can compare that to in comparative value. Right? Let's see, Christ or a new car? Right? That makes no sense. Okay? But there's a lot of people in the world who drive new cars and don't tithe, who have made that choice. Right? I'll do a more personal one. Right? Christ or supersize the extra value meal. Right? How much money do I spend on food, which I clearly don't need as much as I'm consuming, right, that I could be giving to Christ? I would say that's idiotic to choose, more food than you need to eat anyway over Christ. Yet, I do it all the time. Right? Because what we do with our money, even back then, pre-capitalism, showed a lot about what our priorities and our values are. And what it is we really think is important. And so this poor woman, who spent everything she had to pour it over Jesus' head, in that one moment, had her priorities in the right place. So verse 14, then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time he sought the opportunity to betray him. So let's talk for a minute. Judas Iscariot. We haven't seen much of him in Matthew's gospel. He was there at the beginning whenever Jesus called the 12 disciples. He was one of them. And Matthew kind of tipped us off he was a bad seed. Already right at the beginning. But we haven't really seen much of it. Now he pops up again. Well, his first name, Judas, is the Greek form of Judah. Very common name. Very common name at this time in history, as you might imagine. Right? Judah is probably still a very common Jewish name, right, to this day. So there's lots of them. Okay? People who weren't Romans, right? So we'll say Jews, in the first century did not have last names. This is not his last name. We tend to generalize. We think of people as having a first name and a last name, you know. So you'd be surprised how many kids, for example, think that Christ is Jesus' last name. Like it was Joseph and Mary Christ, and then they had their son Jesus. So I once had a kid in Sunday school ask me, "What was Jesus' middle name?" And I was like, "Well, he didn't have a middle name. He didn't even really have a last name." They're like, "No, I know he has a middle name." And I was like, "I'm pretty sure he doesn't." He said, "I think it starts with H." And I was like, "Oh, I know what your parents have been saying around the house. Okay, never mind. I'll talk to them later."
You ever seen the movie Flash?
Yeah. So this is not Judas' last name, right? He's not the son of Bob and Martha Iscariot, right, of Galilee. Iscariot is with lots of people with the same first name, right? There's lots of Judas, there's lots of Yeshuas, there's lots of Jameses, right? How many Jameses have we seen? There's 2 of them just in the 12 disciples. There's 2 Jameses. And then Jesus has another one for a brother. Jesus also has a brother named Judah. Right? And here's another one. You have all these people with the same name. Joseph's, right? Joseph of Arimathea, and you have Joseph. So you had to come up with some way of distinguishing which one you're talking about. Right? So this is why we see Jesus called Jesus of Nazareth, for example. Right? Oh, he's the one from Nazareth. When we're down in Jerusalem, that works because there's not a lot of people from Nazareth. It's a pretty tiny village. Right? So if you say, Jesus, the one from Nazareth, they know who you're talking about. Now, when he was up in Nazareth preaching, they didn't call him Jesus of Nazareth because they're in Nazareth. So that didn't separate him from anybody else. So when they're there, they're like, isn't this the Joseph the carpenter's son? Right? So there they called him essentially Jesus bar Joseph, Jesus the son of Joseph. Right? And so we see this with Peter's actual name is Simon. Right? Simon bar Jonah. In Aramaic, that means son of Jonah. Right? So they'd identify you by, oh, he's so-and-so's son. Or where you were from, Joseph of Arimathea. Right? So that was the most common way to do it. Or sometimes it would be what you did for a living. You know, Judah the fisherman, right? Or Judah the barrel maker, or whatever. And that's actually where a lot of our last names come from, even in English. Right? Like Cooper means barrel maker. A lot of people with the last name Baker. Or people with the last name Johnson, meaning John's son. Same kind of thing. Our last names have the same kind of origins. So what does Iscariot mean? This is debated. It can mean in Aramaic red. Specifically red like the color of blood. Like blood red. Okay. So you get all kinds of theories based on that. Maybe he had red hair, right? Maybe he had a really dark red complexion, right? Maybe they started calling them this after he betrayed Jesus, you know, right? Because he had blood on his hands. So there are those kind of ideas. The other idea that people have discussed lately is there was a group called the Sicarii. That's what they're called in Latin. One of them would be a Sicarius in Latin. That's what the Romans called them, who were a group of zealots. The zealots, remember, were the group in Judea who were trying to violently overthrow the Roman government. That was their goal, to drive the Romans out by force. And the Sicarii were especially bad because they were basically assassins. They weren't trying to like raise an army and go attack the Romans. They were just trying to assassinate Roman officials. Higher ranking the better. Right? So they just went around basically murdering any Romans they could kill and get away with it. So it is suggested that maybe, see, this being the Latin form, right, Sicarius, that maybe Iscariot, right, is sort of the Aramaic and then put into Greek form of that, and that Judas was actually one of these folks. That is possible because one of Jesus' other disciples is referred to as Simon the Zealot. So even if Judas wasn't one, Jesus did have one of these revolutionary guys hanging out with him. So it is possible that Judas was one of these guys. We don't really have enough information to prove it one way or the other. But one of the advantages to this theory that he was one of these revolutionaries is it kind of explains what's going on here in the gospel, because he just sort of pops up all of a sudden. Right? He's been following Jesus. And we haven't seen anything about it. You know, when Jesus sent out the 12, and they're all casting out demons and working miracles and stuff, it doesn't say 11 of them were and Judas couldn't get it to work. Right? Right? Judas tried the whammy, but he didn't have the whammy. Right? It doesn't say that. Right? So according to what we read so far, Judas was out there casting out demons, healing people, baptizing people. Imagine how much that would stink if you were the people who got baptized by Judas. But right? So he's out there doing everything the other disciples are. And then all of a sudden now, he wanders over to the chief priests who are meeting over here with Caiaphas, plotting how they're going to kill Jesus. Shows up and says, "Hey, how much do you pay me if I give you Jesus?" It's kind of abrupt. It's kind of abrupt. Well, if Iscariot is meant to convey something like this, even if it's not exactly this, even if it's just that he was some kind of zealot, right? That he was someone from that party, right? It could kind of make a little sense, right? In the sense that what has Jesus been telling them? Jesus keeps telling them, on the one hand, he keeps saying he's the Messiah. On the other hand, he keeps saying he's going to get killed by the Romans. Right? Well, getting killed by the Romans is not what Judas signed up for. Right? When he signed on to become one of Jesus' disciples, and signed on that this guy was the Messiah. He was not planning on getting killed by Romans. Right? Probably quite the opposite. He was planning on killing some Romans. Right? That was the goal. We got to kill them. We got to get rid of them. So, literally, that's what a lot of people will say is going on. And again, we can't prove it. We can't prove it because we don't know enough about this word. Maybe at some point in the future we will. But right now we don't know enough about this word to absolutely prove it. But it makes sense that that's what Judas's problem is. That Judas's problem is, I wanted the is essentially the same problem that the Pharisees and the teachers of the law have. They have their idea of what the Messiah is supposed to be, and Jesus ain't it. Right? Same kind of thing. Judas has this idea of what the Messiah is supposed to be, and Jesus isn't it. Right? And at this point, then, what we're saying is Judas is trying to cut his losses. Right? Because if what Jesus is saying is true, and he's going to try and now pull something here at the Passover, and the Romans are going to end up killing him and all his followers, right? Jesus isn't in for that. Whereas he may be thinking, well, if I turn him over, right?
Save us all.
He's still going to die, but the rest of us, right, can get out of Dodge. Right? The rest of us can get out of Dodge. It's not going to come down on me. So that's at least a strong possibility. Ultimately, there's a mystery here. There's a mystery here, and it's the mystery of evil. Right? I mean, why does Cain kill Abel? Right? Why can't he control himself? Why can't he fight back against the anger and the sin that, you know? Why does Judas betray? Why does anyone do these terrible things that are going to lead to their own destruction, you know, destruction? There's sort of a mystery there, and a big part of the hymns on Wednesday night and Thursday night in Holy Week are talking about this. Right? They'll have, like, from Jesus' point of view, saying, "Is there something I told the other disciples that I didn't tell you? Right? Is there some power to do miracles I gave them and I didn't give you? Did I, you know, show some favoritism to them over you?" You know, the answer is no. The answer all down the line is no. And yet Judas is the one who chooses to do this. You know, so there's ultimately a mystery there. But this at least provides at least the rationale that might have been going through Judas's head, you know, as he decides to do this horrible thing. And you know, they count out to him 30 pieces of silver, which is not a huge amount of money. It is in the Old Testament. We saw this back in Deuteronomy and a couple other places. That was the price for a slave, for a young male slave, was 30 pieces of silver. So he's not even getting a lot of money, is the idea. It's not like they came to him and offered him, you know, in today's equivalent, this is like maybe $300, right? So,
And it's not even gold.
yeah.
Silver.
Yeah, so it's not 30 pounds of silver, it's 30 little coins, 30 coins, right? So this is equivalent to like $300, right, to betray a person to their death. You know, it's not like they came to him and said, "We'll give you $30 million if you turn on Jesus." You know, it's he approaches them and says, "What'll you give me if I turn on Jesus?" And they tell him, "Not much," and he says, "Okay, that's enough," and does it.
My understanding is that the 30 pieces of silver at that time was the Cadillac rate. That was the highest you could get for a slave. And that's how they arrived at it.
No, it's a young boy slave.
I'm sorry.
It was for a young male slave.
Yeah, that was the highest you could get.
No.
Because if you remember,
Because he doesn't have any training.
well, in Hosea, it's
Yeah.
the same thing, 30 pieces.
Right. And the point there in Hosea is God's saying, you know, I asked Israel for my wages to value me and say, "What am I worth?" And they said 30 pieces of silver. The point is it's an insult to God. That it's an insult to him. Right? Because a young male slave has the potential to grow up, but you're going to have to teach him something. Right? The slaves who commanded high dollars were ones, like if you had a slave who could read and write, right, who could transcribe for you, you know, dictation, you know, that was super valuable. If you had one that could at least do different tasks with, you know, take care of your horses, whatever, any particular thing, that would be worth more money. So a young boy, again, potentially, you could teach him to do something else.
He's unskilled.
But unskilled. And by young boy, we're talking about 12, 13 years old.
Yeah, unskilled labor.
Is it true that Judas is the only person that the church says is definitely in hell?
Yeah, but that's not here. That's in the Book of Acts. So we'll get there. Yeah. The book of Acts says he went to hell, and it's the only, to Hades, but it's the only person in the Bible who specifically is described as
Going there.
dying under condemnation. Yeah. Okay. So we read in verse 16, from that point he sought the opportunity to betray him. So Judas goes back and is still traveling with Jesus, but now he's looking for his opportunity, right, to turn Jesus over to his enemies.
Why didn't you just take the money and run?
It wasn't that much money, and he wouldn't have gotten that far. So verse 17, now on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples came to Jesus saying to him, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" And he said, "Go into the city to a certain man and say to him, the teacher says, my time is at hand. I will keep the Passover at your house with my disciples." Now a couple notes. We're going to see in the other Gospels, different things happen on different days of the week. Okay? But in Matthew, remember this year, talking about 32 AD, Passover proper, right, falls on a Saturday, on a Sabbath. Okay. So, Passover proper being on the Sabbath, right, you can't have the Passover meal on Passover. Why? Well, because you got to cook it, right? You got to kill the lambs, you got to cook it, you got to do all the stuff. You can't do that on the Sabbath. Okay? So, also remember, in the Jewish system for reckoning days, when does the day start?
It does.
It's not 12:01 a.m. It's at sundown. Okay? So Passover starts really Friday night, right? Or Friday at about 5 o'clock, 5:30, right, when the sun goes down. Okay? So if you're going to eat the Passover meal at night, the way you're supposed to, what night are you going to have to eat it?
Thursday.
Thursday night, right? You can't do it Friday night. You have to do it Thursday night. So as Matthew presents it, what we call the Last Supper or the Mystical Supper is Jesus eating the Passover meal with his disciples on Thursday night. Okay. Thursday night, which by the Jewish reckoning is part of Friday. Okay. It's part of Friday. So they say to him, they've been coming in and out of town every day. Well, now time's coming up for the actual feast. Okay. Can't keep waiting because we're not going to be able to do this on the Sabbath. So I say to him, okay, where do you want to go to eat the feast? Right, to eat the meal. And they say, go to the city, go to a certain man that Jesus tells him. Say, the teacher says, my time is at hand, I'll keep the Passover at your house with my disciples. So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. Okay, so in Matthew's Gospel, it's pretty simple. They don't even tell us who the guy is. Right? It's apparently someone who knows Jesus from his preaching. Right? He says to the disciples, go tell them that's where we're going to eat.
So Thursday they would prepare all the food that day.
Right. So that's what the disciples are doing. The disciples spend that day preparing all the food. Right? They got to get the bitter herbs. They got to get all the whole shebang for the Passover meal. Right. Get the lamb cooked. The whole deal. Okay. So verse 20, when evening had come, he sat down with the 12. Now as they were eating, he said, "Assuredly I say to you, one of you will betray me." So lest you think that Jesus doesn't know what's going on, Jesus knows exactly what's going on. Right? He knows darn well that Judas is planning to betray him. Verse 22, and they were exceedingly sorrowful, that each of them began to say to him, "Lord, is it I?" Now let's pause for a second. Let's pause for a second. If I was eating dinner with a couple of my best friends, and one of them said, "One of you is going to stab me in the back," my response would not be, "Is it me?" Right? My response would be, "You jerk," to the guy next to me. Right? It must be him, it's not me. Right? So Matthew is very subtly telling us something here. Right? He's very subtly telling us something here. He's telling us that all the other disciples, right, they're already, we're going to see in a little bit, they're all going to run off. Right? But that's not something that just happens out of the blue. Right? All this stuff Jesus told them about judgment and all this stuff and destruction and how he's going to die, right? The Romans are going to kill him. They're all a little unsure. Right? Ultimately, all of them are going to betray him to a certain extent. Right? Right? Because they're going to leave. They're going to flee. And Peter's going to deny even knowing him. Right? Not going to betray him to the extent that Judas did. Right? But so it's because of that. Right? That shows you they're already. So yeah, when Jesus says that tells you how far things have broken down, that all of his disciples go, "He's on to me. He knows I've got doubts." Right? Because that's how Matthew says they responded, including Matthew himself. Right? He knows what's going on. And that shows you, also gives us a picture of just how alone Jesus was. Even before the disciples fled. He did not have what we call today a support system. In modern lingo. Right? Verse 23, he answered and said, "He who dipped his hand with me in the dish will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes just as it is written of him. But woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would have been good for that man if he had not been born." Then Judas, who was betraying him, answered and said, "Rabbi, is it I?" He said to him, "You have said it." Okay.
Why would he ask that? Just to be smart?
Well, he didn't want to. First of all,
I guess
based on what Jesus said, "He who dips his bread in the bowl with me," Judas must have just done it. Right? Since he just said the one who dips his bread in the bowl is the one who's going to betray me. It's kind of a... Everybody turned their head and looked at Judas. Right? And so Judas, in that moment of everyone looking at him, says, "Oh, is it me?" Right? Like he has no idea. How could it be me? Right? And so Jesus says, "You have said so." He tells him it's him.
He tells Judas he knows he turned him in.
Yeah. He knows, well, that he's planning to. That he's plotting to. Okay? And after telling him that it would have been good if he hadn't been born.
On the confession of Judas then, and the word betrayal, where are the other disciples mentally then in this? Are you saying that since they have doubts about Jesus, because if he goes to betray Jesus, aren't they in trouble also? Because
No, if he goes to betray Jesus, they wouldn't necessarily be in trouble. No. Now, if the Romans come down on Jesus, they're going to find anyone he ever met or said hi to and kill him. But the chief priests just want to get rid of Jesus.
But the chief priests aren't mentioned here. What is mentioned is his betrayal.
Right, but that's who Judas is planning to betray him to.
But do the other disciples know that it's going to the chief priest or to Rome?
Well, they don't know. They clearly don't know exactly, or they
Yeah.
wouldn't think it might be them. Right? For them to think it might be them, they don't have a conclusive, he doesn't say, yeah, one of you is going to betray me to the chief priest. This is one of you is going to betray me.
Well,
Right?
I'm
Meaning a lot of them might have been sitting there going, well, maybe the Romans are going to execute him. I better be ready to cut and run.
that's
You
what
know.
I was wondering about.
Or maybe they're sitting there thinking, do I really want to go through with this? Maybe he's going to get killed by the Romans, maybe he isn't, but do I want to stick my neck out here? Right? That's what I'm saying. That's what's going through their heads. They clearly have their doubts. And some of them are getting ready to run already, probably. And that's why he says, one of you is going to betray me, and they all think it's them.
But they know how the Romans will cure the problem.
Oh, yeah.
They'll just go.
Oh, yeah, everybody knows that, yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why they run. That's why none of them show up to watch the crucifixion, except for John. Because, that would be a dead giveaway.
I'm lost. It does the logic. I'm not getting the logic because like I said, if you have your doubts that Jesus is not the Christ, and I'm thinking you're one of the disciples, okay? We don't know who Judas is going to. Is he going to Rome? Because as you recall...
Well, they haven't said anything about Judas here. The other disciples haven't said a word about Judas.
No,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but he says, is it I? And Jesus is talking
Yeah.
to him. And he said, you said it.
And
you're the one.
we don't get any reaction from the other disciples.
Well, that's what concerns me because that's where the logic in my little brain breaks down. Simply because, wait a minute, if we doubt that he's the Christ, remember, look at all of the things that has been said about the coming Messiah. The same things that are said about Caesar, okay, being all powerful, almighty, all good. Nations shall be on his shoulder, okay? Looking at that, the first thing I would think is he's going to Rome. The officials...
Well, first of all, that's jumping to a conclusion. First of all, the first thing they probably all thought was they were relieved that Jesus wasn't onto them. Right? Because their first question is it me? And Jesus says, no, it's him. My first response is, oh, it's not me. Okay, good. Right? It's not me. That's the first response. Right? But second response, betrayal is a wide open word. He doesn't say one of you is going to hand me over to my death. He says one of you is going to betray me. That might just mean Judas is going to take off. Judas is going to leave the group.
And then one of the other gospels doesn't do that. It says he gets up and leaves.
Well, that's another gospel. Yeah. But here in Matthew, he doesn't get up and leave. Right? Here in Matthew, he sticks around for the rest of the dinner. Right? So clearly they didn't think it meant that he was going to murder Jesus. Right? Or they would have, not probably finished dinner with him. Right? So, they may have just thought, oh, well, he's going to leave the group. Right? He's going to leave our movement. He's going to, you know what I mean? Betray is kind of open
Yeah, it's another
word, Okay. So he identifies as it is Judas. And now immediately, in verse 26, and as they were eating, so they all keep eating after this, right? 11 of them relieved, right? Judas probably sweating profusely. But, right? Now that he knows Jesus is on to him. As they were eating, Jesus took bread, blessed and broke it, and gave it to the disciples and said, take, eat, this is my body. Then he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to them, saying, drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for many for the remission of sins. But I say to you, I will not drink of this fruit of the vine from now on until that day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. And we'll pick up on that here in a couple chapters at the end. Okay. And then verse 30, and when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. So what is Jesus doing here? Well, Jesus just created Christian worship in 4 verses. Right? He just created Christian worship. He said this is the new covenant, right? We had the old covenant, the Old Testament, right? And what was the old covenant focused on?
The law.
Well, but what did they start with? Sacrifices, right? They killed animals, right? Remember when they first made it? They killed a whole bunch of animals and took the blood and sprinkled it on everybody. Remember? That was how they started the old covenant, was the blood of these animals, right? Jesus tells you what's about to happen in the next couple days. This is starting a new covenant. Right? New covenant in my blood, not the blood of a bunch of animals, right? Goats and sheep and oxen, right? But in my blood, right? And so now the Christian church, instead of getting together and having sacrifices every day of animals, is going to do what? They're going to gather together. They're going to take the bread and the wine and receive Christ's body and blood every day. Right? How do we know that Jesus is talking about this in terms of worship? Well, how does it end? They sing a hymn. Right? They get done and they sing a hymn. Right? So this is worship. Right? This is worship. Okay? And so this from the very, very beginning, right? After Pentecost, this is what the Christian community does. It makes them Christian. They gather together on the first day of the week in particular and celebrate the Eucharist. Take the bread and the wine, offer them to God, receive the body and blood of Christ. Right? On Saturdays, they keep going to synagogues. Right? Because Jesus is the Messiah. Right? And they're all Jews. So they go to the synagogue, and what happens at the synagogue? They sing some psalms, right? And then they have reading from the Torah, from the law. First they have a procession with the Torah scroll. Then they have a reading from the Torah, from the law. Then they have a reading from the prophets. Right? Someone preaches. And then they leave. Right? That's Saturday. Right? That's the Sabbath. Then first day of the week, Sunday, the next day, they get together as Christians and have the Eucharist. Okay? At the end of the first century, beginning of the second century, the rabbinic Jews at that time throw all the Christians out of the synagogue. So since they got thrown out of the synagogue, okay, what do? Well, they take what they used to do in the synagogue and they stick it onto the front of what they do on Sunday. So now on Sunday, right, you come to a service, right, you sing a bunch of psalm verses, then you have a procession, not with the Torah scroll, but with the book of the Gospels, right? Instead of reading from the law and reading from the prophets, you have a reading from the Gospel and a reading from the epistles. Somebody preaches, and then you go right into the Eucharist, right? Offering the bread and wine to God, receiving the body and blood of Christ. Okay. So the way our liturgy is structured, Christ Church, goes back to that Thursday. Right? Goes back to that Thursday. And that's why we celebrate we do it on Thursday morning, because we move everything forward in Holy Week about 12 hours by anticipation. But Thursday morning, we have that liturgy that celebrates the first liturgy. Around 6:30 in the morning. Okay. Now notice, something to notice here. Judas didn't leave. Judas went and received the Eucharist. Right? He doesn't say, everybody, take it. Well, hold up, Judas. I'm just going to give you a blessing and then just pass it to the next guy. Right? He doesn't. Right? Judas chooses to do it and he lets Judas do it. Okay? What does that mean? What does that mean? You remember? I'm setting the Wayback Machine now, I know. Some of you weren't even here 4 years ago. That's coming out 5 years ago. But this is when the study started. But back in Genesis, the very first covenant we talked about was with Abraham. And in Hebrew and Aramaic, you don't write a covenant, you cut a covenant. That's the language you use. You cut a covenant between two people. And the reason they call it that is a whole bunch of animals get killed, right? As we were just saying when you start a covenant. But specifically, the covenant ritual that God used, it's kind of a weird scene from our perspective if you don't understand sort of the societal thing in 2000 BC. But he tells Abraham, go get these 7 birds and cut them in half. Right? Lay one half on this side and one half on this side of the path. And normally, when someone's making a covenant, covenants weren't like contracts now where there's 2 equal sides. Right? Covenants were, I'm the guy with the power and the authority, I'm going to give you a covenant, right? And that covenant is going to tell you, right, what I've done for you and who I am and how great I am, and then what I expect from you in return. Okay? So then the person who's getting the covenant, the little person, right, they're expected to take an oath that they're going to abide by the covenant. And the way they would take that oath is they would walk in between those animals that had been cut in half. The symbolism being, if I break this covenant, may I end up like these animals. Right? May I end up like these dead animals. Right? Cut in 2, being the idea. Right? In Abraham's case, God doesn't make Abraham walk through. But God appears in the form of a torch of fire. Maybe familiar from something we heard today in church. In terms of which person of the Trinity it was who appeared. And walks through, God walks through the middle. Right? So God effectively says to Abraham, if this covenant gets broken, may I end up like these animals. Which in the original context, Abraham would have said, well, you can't kill God, so of course. That means the covenant can't be broken. Right? Well, we know, of course, the covenant with Israel was broken, right, pretty badly, almost immediately. Right? Right? But was all of Israel destroyed for it?
No.
Did God die for it?
No. Jesus did.
Well, Jesus is God, right?
Yeah.
So in a way, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Right? Jesus did end up like those animals.
He got
Okay.
slaughtered.
But so, right? If this is the new covenant, if the Eucharist is the new covenant in Jesus' blood, then every time someone approaches it and receives it, what kind of oath are they swearing? If I betray this covenant, then what happened to Jesus happened to me. Right? This is why St. Paul says if we approach the Eucharist unworthily, right, that we bring guilt for the of Christ upon ourselves. Right? That we drink it to our own condemnation. Right? If we approach unworthily. Okay? So what Judas here has essentially done, right, is condemn himself. Condemn himself. So not only does he stay, but he swears, he signs on, right, to the new covenant. After everything Jesus said about the last judgment, right, after everything leading up to this, Judas still, right, plays the game. And this is part of why, like I said, not only does Jesus say here, it'd be better if he hadn't been born in the first place, right? But we're going to see later on in Acts, that's why he's the one person, as you mentioned, who the scriptures say died under condemnation.
What would have happened if he had? I guess there were a lot of other potential candidates.
If he had repented, then just like St. Peter, he would have been forgiven.
But Christ still would have been.
But he didn't. And Jesus knew he wouldn't.
So he could have betrayed Christ, fulfilled his role, and still repented.
Yeah.
What if he repented first?
But he didn't. So. Okay. Verse 31. So now they've gone out to the Mount of Olives. Okay. They've left town again. They've left Jerusalem again. Remember they ate last supper in Jerusalem. They went out to the Mount of Olives, which is right next to Jerusalem. But at this point was essentially a wooded area. There's a lot of stuff there now. There wasn't stuff there then. Right? So this is a place where you could go to be in private. Right? Like to pray. Okay. So they went there. Verse 31, Jesus said to them, all of you will be made to stumble because of me this night. Okay. So notice, remember the, is it me? Is it me? Right? Jesus sort of, all the relief they probably had when he pointed to Judas, well, they're all now back on the right? He said, look, all of you are going to, right? All of you are going to stumble tonight. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go before you to Galilee. Peter answered and said to him, even if all are made to stumble because of you, I will never be made to stumble. Good old Peter again, right? The guy who, any questions? Right? First guy, right? Jumps right in there. Oh, not me, right? Jesus said to him, assuredly I say to you that this night before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. Peter said to him, even if I have to die with you, I will not deny you. Right. Even if they're killing you, I will die with you. Right? But notice what comes next. And so said all the disciples. By the way, that includes Judas too. So they all start, oh, no. We'll all go to our deaths with you, Jesus. Sure. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. And he took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and he began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. Then he said to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. He went a little farther and fell on his face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. We'll pause here for a second, because this is one of those passages in the Bible that gets people confused. Because first of all, so what, Jesus doesn't want to die? He's been going around pretty much his whole life here telling everybody he was going to die. Now he doesn't want to die. Or he's scared to die. Or he doesn't want to die, but God wants him to die. Right? Is that what it's saying? What's it saying? Okay. So, this is something that's going to be important in later theology. And the 6th Ecumenical Council in 681 AD was mostly about this. Okay. Because if Jesus is God, right? It's the second person of the Trinity. There's 3 persons in the Trinity, Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Jesus is the Son, right? So he's a divine person, right? And he takes on himself human nature. Not a human nature, right? There's no such thing as a human nature. You've never seen one, right? You ever seen a human nature? You pick one up, can you look at it? It's not a thing, right? So you can't have a human nature. The human nature we all share. What makes us human beings, right? That we all share. He takes that upon himself. Okay? So he has, as God, he has the divine nature that he shares with the Father and the Holy Spirit. And as he becomes man, he shares our human nature. So he's one person, right? He's got two different natures that he shares. Okay? So then there's the word will, right? Will. We talk about free will all the time. Right? The concept of free will did not exist at the time the Gospel of Matthew was written. So this is one of the basic problems we have in our trying to understand it, is we have this other category that we think about that didn't exist then. We think about our will as sort of what we use to decide what to do, right? If I have free will, that means I can decide to do A or I can go and do B. Right? I can go eat at Outback, I can go eat at Chili's, right? Or I can go eat at Five Guys, right? It's what I use to choose between these different options I have. Okay? That's not the kind of will we're talking about here. Okay? It's not the kind of will we're talking about here. The kind of will we're talking about here is what is sometimes called a natural will. It's called a natural will because it has to do with your nature. Okay? So that means Jesus shares the divine nature. He also shares the divine will. Right? The Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, they all have one will. They all want one thing. Right? They all have one goal. They aren't moving in three different directions. Right? They're together. They're unified. So they have one will, one purpose, one goal. Okay? Human beings, when they were originally created by God, same thing. Right? We had one human nature. We all had one will, one purpose, one goal. Things got a little messed up. Right? Because of sin. Okay? Now because of sin, as human beings, we're going in all kinds of different directions. Right? And we all want different things. And sometimes the things we want are at the expense of other people. Right? But that's all because of sin. Okay? It's all because of sin. Jesus doesn't have sin.
But he has human nature.
He has human nature, and so he has the original human will. Right? Which wants what? Good. Right? Wants good things. Right? Wants good things. And so the church fathers will talk about this kind of natural will. They'll talk about like animals having a natural will. Right? Not because, your dog or cat is sitting there going, should I go tear up the couch or should I go poop in the dining room? Right? They're not sitting there deciding what to do. Right? But because based on their nature of what they are, right, they have a goal and a purpose to fulfill what they are, right? So they'll eat, they'll clean themselves, right? If an animal has babies, they'll protect their babies, right? That's all based on the kind of animal it is, right? So built into human nature are those same kind of things, okay? Before sin, right? So humans want to find a member of the opposite gender and have children with them, right? And protect those children and care for those children and nurture those children, right? And they want to eat, right? And can prolong their lives, and they want to remain healthy, right? There's nothing bad about that, but it's not free will either, right? In the sense that well, gee, do I want to starve myself? I mean, some people do now because of sin, but originally, human beings could just see what was good and what was right, and they would do it. So because of sin, we have this other kind of free will. Because of our sin, we can't always tell what the right thing to do is. We can't always tell what is good. We can't always tell what is right. We choose what we think is good. Like right now, I think it would be great to go and do X, right? Right now, I think it would be great to go to Wendy's and get a triple bacon. Right? When I have a coronary tomorrow, right? I might rethink whether that was the best plan. But right now, it seems like a great idea, right? Right? And because I'm sinful and I'm gluttonous, right, I should make the wrong choice. Right? I make the wrong choice. If it wasn't for sin, I would look at it and go, it should have a salad. Right? So but that's just an example. So Jesus has a human will. And part of that human will is to live. Right? Death is not normal for human beings. Death was not part of God's plan originally. He didn't create us to die. He created us to live forever with Him, right? That was the original intent. We messed that up. And brought sin into the world, and through sin, death came into the world. So, for Jesus, who doesn't have sin, his human nature, it doesn't want to die. Right? He doesn't want to die. Death is foreign to him completely. Right? Foreign to him completely. Yeah. But being God, he's going to follow the divine will. He knows that there's a greater purpose that's being fulfilled by his death. So the purpose of this struggle here, where we see Jesus in Gethsemane, isn't, oh wow, Jesus didn't know what to do. Or, oh wow, Jesus almost backed out of the whole thing. That's not what it's telling us. It's trying to show us, Jesus has been talking rather flippantly about dying for the whole gospel. Right? Oh yeah, they're going to crucify me when we get to Jerusalem. I mean, he said it several times. Right? This is to remind us, Jesus is really human. He's really human. He's not being flippant about it. Right? It's not like he's not going to feel it when they put the nails in. It's not that he's not going to feel the pain. It's not that it's not going to be horrible for him. Right? He's not just some spirit that looks like a human being, who's just going to blow this whole death thing off. Right? But he's really human, just like us. Just like us, he doesn't want to die. He especially doesn't want to die the way they're going to kill him. So verse 40, then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping. Remember, these are the guys who just, 5 minutes ago were, we'll die with you if we have to. Right? Now he says, look, I'm suffering. Right? I'm suffering. I'm struggling. Can you guys come with me and pray with me? Okay. Same guys. Jesus says, what? He says to Peter. Notice he says it to Peter, because Peter was the leader of the pack, right? No, I'm not going to deny you. No way. Right? So he says to Peter, what? Can you not watch with me 1 hour? Watch and pray lest you enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak. What does he mean by that? Well, your spirit, you got all fired up back there. Right? You got all fired up back there. But look at you now already. It hasn't even been an hour and you're already falling asleep on me when I most need you. When I most need you, the most horrible night of my life. You guys are supposed to be my best friends. You can't even give me an hour to pray with me. And you're falling asleep. Again, a second time he went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me, unless I drink it, your will be done. And he came and found them asleep again, for their eyes were heavy. So I say, well, they just ate a big meal. Verse 44, so he left them, went away again, and prayed the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Behold, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is being betrayed into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand. Something to remember, too, a few chapters back. Remember we had a whole bunch of parables about Jesus' return? Remember the virgins? Didn't have enough oil because bridegroom showed up at midnight. Caught him sleeping. How well were they paying attention during the eschatological discourse? Right. Even when he's standing there telling them, look, stay awake, they can't do it. They didn't have coffee. But. Verse 47. And while he was still speaking, behold, Judas, one of the 12, with a great multitude, with swords and clubs, came from the chief priests and elders of the people. So, while he's still telling them that, while he's still waking them up, right, here comes Judas. Judas found his opportunity, right? All the other disciples did what? They fell asleep. While Jesus was praying. While they were asleep, he tiptoed off, right?
So Judas was the one who stayed awake.
Oh, Judas was the one who stayed awake, looking for his opportunity. They were all asleep. Jesus was there by himself. Now's our chance to grab him. So here he comes with a great multitude, huge crowd, with swords and clubs from the chief priests and elders of the people. Right? Why would they have swords and clubs? These are the temple guard. The chief priests have their temple guards. Right? So they call him out, right, to go and arrest Jesus. Now his betrayer had given them a sign, saying, whomever I kiss, he is the one, seize him. Immediately went up to Jesus and said, greetings, Rabbi, and kissed him.
And he wasn't there. He didn't go with them to the
No, Judas snuck off while they were asleep. Yeah. When everybody else went to sleep, he snuck off and got the...
I didn't think he went there, but I guess he did.
So, he walks up. Greetings, Rabbi. Walks up to Jesus, all friendly, and gives him a kiss. Gives him a kiss on the cheek. This is why, for the record, it is the practice of the Orthodox Church that you never kiss an icon of Christ on his face.
You what?
You don't kiss an icon of Christ on his face.
Oh.
Because that's where Judas kissed him. You kiss his hand or his feet. Yeah. On icons. Okay. So Judas comes up and gives him this big kiss. But Jesus said to him, friend, why have you come? Jesus plays along. Oh gosh, Fred, why are you here? Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and took him. And suddenly one of those who were with him stretched out his hand and drew his sword, struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Now you don't get the whole picture of this in English. In the Greek, it literally says that he cleaved at his head and cut off his ear. So, whichever one of the disciples now I know there's other gospels, this one doesn't say. Right? So it doesn't say who it was. But one of the disciples pulls out a sword, right, goes after one of these temple guards. Right? And what's saying is he wasn't trying to fence with him. Okay, he took a swing in his head to try and kill him. He tried to kill this temple guard. Instead, he didn't quite get the right. We don't know if it's because of the helmet or what, but he ends up taking off his ear. Yeah. But Jesus said to him, put your sword in its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Or do you think that I cannot now pray to my Father, and he will provide me with more than 12 legions of angels? How then could the scriptures be fulfilled that it must happen thus? Right, what is Jesus saying? Where did Jesus ever tell his disciples, when the Romans come to get me, stop them? He did. Right? He didn't. Right? He's been telling them, I'm going to go there, they're going to kill me. He never said, so make sure you got plenty of swords to make sure that doesn't happen. Right? He never told them they were trying to stop that happening. In fact, he's saying, if I wanted to stop this from happening, trust me, I could stop this from happening. Right? No idea of 12 legions. See, Rome had 12 legions. That was the whole Roman army. It was 12 legions. So when Jesus says, I could call 12 legions of angels, he's saying, I could call down the whole an army the size of Rome's on these guys. If that was the point here. Right? If I was trying to stop this from happening. So he's saying,
This one doesn't say that he healed the man.
right, that's a different gospel. That's a different gospel. But notice what he says. Right, notice what he says. All who take the sword will perish by the sword. Right? Because this gives us a window again into how his disciples are thinking. Right? What are we here, the Messiah, here to do? We're to fight. We're going to fight the Romans. Right? That's how we're going to beat them. Jesus has been trying to get through. That's not how we're going to beat them. Right? We're not going to beat them by trying to play their own game. The Romans rule by terror. Right? We're not going to try terrorism back. Especially a terrorism fight between you and the Romans win. Right? And that's what all these other false messiahs try. That's what Simon Bar Kokhba tries in 128 that ends up getting the whole city of Jerusalem wiped out. Right? You don't try and out-terrorize the Romans. Okay. Verse 55, in that hour Jesus said to the multitudes, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to take me? I sat daily with you teaching in the temple, and you did not seize me. Right? These last few days, I've been sitting there in broad daylight, in the middle of the temple. You guys run the temple, right? You're the chief priests. You temple guards, you're standing around the temple. You never said anything. You never came and arrested me then. But all this was done that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled. Then all the disciples forsook him and fled. You see how long that lasted? Oh no, we'll die with you if we have to. Oh, you're getting arrested? See you. All right, they all run off. Verse 57, those who had laid hold of Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were assembled. But Peter followed him at a distance to the high priest's courtyard, and he went in and sat with the servants to see the end. Okay. So he goes in. Of course, they haul him back to Caiaphas, who's the high priest, who we talked about. And Peter sort of, goes stealth mode, right? Sneaks behind him, stays back a ways, gets into the courtyard outside the high priest's house, right, where some people are milling around. Yeah, they got a campfire. He followed him at a distance. He's
You gotta get back to him.
at a distance. He's gonna, right? He's gonna see what happens. So now 59. Now the chief priests, the elders, and all the council sought false testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Even though many false witnesses came forward, they found none, but at least they found none. So what they're trying to do, right, they've got to find some crime they can convict Jesus of. Right? According to the law, according to the Torah, what do you need to convict somebody of a crime? Two witnesses. Right? Meaning you have to have two witnesses to tell the same story. The exact same story. Right? So they've got all these false witnesses who are ready to accuse Jesus of stuff. Right? But the problem is they keep bringing them in one after another and none of their stories match. Right? They can't find two of them that'll tell the same lie. Right? They can't find two who accuse Jesus of the same thing. But at last 2 false witnesses came forward and said, this fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. Right? But we saw he did say that. Right? I'm able to destroy the temple of God and build it in 3 days. Now, that saw at the time he's talking about himself. So himself is the temple of God. But okay, we found 2 people who said that. Well, he's saying he's going to destroy the temple. Okay, we'll run with this. Right? This is the best we've got. Right? Now, how precisely, this is before explosives, how precisely they thought Jesus was going to go and tear down Herod's temple by himself. Right? You figure out, but this is what they got, so they go with it. Verse 62, and the high priest arose and said to him, do you answer nothing? What is it that these men testify against you? Right? So he's trying to get, remember what they were doing in the temple, right? When they were coming and questioning him, right? We got to get some goods on this guy, right? Not only can we not find anybody to give us anything juicy to convict him on, right? He's just standing there not saying anything, right? So we can't catch him and say, maybe he'll let something slip and we can, latch onto it. Well, he's just standing there not saying anything, right? Verse 63, but Jesus kept silent. And the high priest answered and said to him, I put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God. So he says, I want you to swear an oath, right? For the God of Israel, are you the Messiah? Right? Are you the Messiah? Verse 64, Jesus said to him, it is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. Okay? So, he says, basically, yep, I'm the Messiah. And you're going to see the Son of Man, like refer back to Daniel, remember? Son of Man, one like the Son of Man who comes up before the Ancient of Days. Right hand of power is another way of talking about God the Father. Right? So he says, yes, I'm the Messiah, and yes, in the future I'm going to come in judgment. Right? Then the high priest tore his clothes, saying, he has spoken blasphemy. What further need do we have with witnesses? Look now, you have heard his blasphemy. What do you think? Okay. Did he say anything that's actually blasphemy? Right? He says the Messiah. Lots of people have shown up claiming to be the Messiah. I mean, I guess if you're wrong, that's technically blasphemy, right? I mean, you claim to be the Messiah and you're not the Messiah, right? And you know you're not the Messiah. Right? But, I mean, there have been lots of other, and in the future, Simon Bar Kokhba, lots of other people who think they're the Messiah. Right? But this shows you, this is not a legitimate court proceeding we're having here, right? Caiaphas didn't go and have Jesus arrested and brought there so that he could give him a fair trial. I'd really like to hear out this Jesus fellow and see what he has to say. Right? That's not, remember Caiaphas is one of the ones who was plotting to kill him already. So Caiaphas, has been planning to kill him. This is a trial set up
To kill him.
to kill him. Right? This is a sham trial. Right? This is, we need to get something on the record that we could kill him for. Okay. So is it really blasphemy? No. But if he's claiming to be the Messiah, who's going to really want to kill him? The Romans.
Yeah, the Romans did.
Right? Meaning, now they've got something to work with. Right? They didn't have something before. Right? The best they could do before was, well, he claims he's going to destroy the temple. Well, he's one guy. How is he going to tear down? Right? That's going to be a hard sell in terms of getting this guy executed. But now that he's claimed to be a king, right? He's just claimed to be a king. And not just any king, but a king sent by God to restore the kingdom of Israel. Right? Now we got him. We tell Caesar that. Right? Caesar's represented in that. That's a good way to get yourself killed, claiming to be the Messiah. So he says to the people there, what do you think? They answered and said, he is deserving of death. Then they spat in his face and beat him, and others struck him with the palms of their hands, saying, prophesy to us, Christ, who is the one who struck you? So they're all pretty convinced he's not really the Messiah. We'll put it that way. Verse 69, now Peter sat outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. Okay, so there's this courtyard outside. You got a picture of this. They've got a fire going. It's the middle of the night. Right? To stay warm. Okay. And so all the household servants are still up because they're having this trial. Right? Which is all Caiaphas' his household servants up there. So Peter's kind of keeping a low profile, hanging out by the fire, trying to hear what's going on inside. Right? Trying to find out what's going on with Jesus. And this servant girl comes up to him. It says, you also were with Jesus of Galilee. Right? So she comes up and says, hey, didn't I see you hanging out with him in the city when he was teaching and stuff? But he denied it before them all, saying, I do not know what you are saying. He says, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. And when he had gone out to the gateway, right, so he gets up and moves. Right? So by the fire, he's like, I'm just going to slides over here, right? Over a shadowy corner over here, right? See what I can hear. Okay. When he's over there, another servant girl sees him. It said to those who were there, this fellow was with Jesus of Nazareth. She's like, I saw this guy with Jesus of Nazareth. But again, he denied it with an oath. So now he's swearing. I swear, I do not know the man. I do not know Jesus. I don't even know him. And a little later, those who stood by came up and said to Peter, surely you also are one of them, for your speech betrays you. Right? So he's still hanging around there. They're listening to him. He's got that Galilean accent. Right? He's got a Galilean accent. They're like, come on. Admit it. You got to be one of them. Then he began to curse and swear. Curse and swear, invoking curses on himself. Saying, I do not know the man. Immediately a rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the word of Jesus who had said to him, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So he went out and wept bitterly. Right, so sunrise comes, the rooster crows. Peter gets caught, and he just flees. So yeah, he went a little ways, but now he too runs off in tears. So another happy place to leave off our Bible study. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
We've got... So next week, nothing's going on, so I think we're just meeting next week. As far as I know.